Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. On Thursday, Lazio destroyed Ajax in a away game 3-1. And then on Monday, something incredible happened. Lazio losing 6-0 at home against Inter. Alasdair, I don't know what happened. I mean, we just beat Ajax away without fans. Great performance. And then a couple of days later, we've been hammered by Inter. I've been going to the stadium for 40 years, and I don't remember Lazio losing so badly against a football team.
Yeah, it was a strange night, pretty difficult night. And the strangeness for me was that you're right. I've never seen Lazio lose this heavily, yet at the same time, I've definitely seen Lazio be more dominated in games. I feel like it was a game of moments where Inter were just completely ruthless when they had their opportunities, and Lazio just fell to pieces, to be honest. The defense issues did not help, that's for sure. Not that we haven't been saying that's a problem waiting to come all season, but it wasn't the night we wanted that problem to kind of be exposed. But yeah, a lot to get through, Vittorio, because it was a bad night.
Because the bizarre thing is, when this thing happens, you've been dominated for 95 minutes. Instead, I thought, till the penalty, Inter's penalty, Lazio was playing definitely much better than Inter. We created chances, and Inter pretty much was defending. And then this bizarre penalty comes, and the games change. A little bit like Parma, right, Alasdair? Where Rovella goal has been disallowed, and 5 minutes later he makes that mistakes and Parma score. Only that Lazio didn't get back, right? The penalty, Di Marco scoring 5 minutes later, and the game is finished for us.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be, because, okay, 2-0 down at halftime, it can happen. You know, it's the classic kind of time you don't want to concede, as they say, just before the break. But it did actually feel like, to be honest, the break came at a good time for Lazio, in a sense, because Inter had suddenly gained all the momentum really quickly, and Lazio seemed like they were struggling to react. So the most disappointing thing for me was the way that they totally failed to react in the second half. It got even worse. And they didn't play their football at all in the second half. Because, and as mentioning this to you just before we came on, I thought it was bold from Baroni, and to be applauded, to be honest. The fact that he stuck to his guns. He played 4 attacking players. He said before the game, you know, I could have put in another midfielder, but I was wanting to get this team to play our own brand of football, to stick to our identity. And he was proven right to do that, because the first half hour of the game, Lazio did play their football. They were the team creating all the chances. Inter barely left their half in that first half an hour or so. So the failure for me, if there was just one, which there wasn't, but it wasn't about selection or tactics. It was about I think the team completely mentally collapsed and structurally collapsed, and lost any sort of semblance of idea about how they're supposed to be playing. Because Inter in that second half, we can talk about Marasic moving to centre back and the problems there, but even so, the amount of times they could just run through the centre of the pitch, there were spaces everywhere, and that's the really concerning part for me. That second half performance was just terrible, considering that they had the opportunity to try and change things at halftime.
I thought that every single goal Inter made was one of our mistakes. I mean, the first one is an incredible penalty. I mean, 2024, and she goes still jumping with his hands wide. That's incredible. The second one, Marosic is far out of position. The third one, Barella is completely free outside the box. Provedel wasn't great yesterday, to be honest. Do you think that the game changed when Hila went out? Because before that, we were pretty much controlling the game, and both Lautaro and Thuram were pretty much invisible. And then when Gila came out, Gigot struggled, then he came off, Marusic in the central position. I thought Patrick in the second half couldn't stop Thuram at all. And probably that's our defense that didn't give us any chance to not win the game, because I thought, I have to be honest with you, at the end of the first half, I thought this is finished. We're never going to recover 2 goals down to Inter. But didn't expect to concede other 4 goals. I thought, well, this is finished. It's going to be a 2-0, a very boring second half. But our defense probably collapsed with all those changes, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I felt that Inter exposed pretty much every weakness that we'd worried about this season at once. I think that's where things went wrong for Lazio. You mentioned Provedel not having the season he's had in years gone by. He's not making the wonder saves anymore. And last night, okay, you can maybe have issue with him for a few goals, but he should save at least something. I don't remember him making any saves apart from the one for the corner that led to the penalty. Tavares, we've said so far this season, great going forward. Clearly not that great at the back, but the benefit outweighs the negative. It didn't last night because he couldn't make any impact going forward, and he was really exposed in defense.
Yeah.
The defensive depth is exposed. The midfield was exposed. We saw, Zaccagni looking kind of moody and selfish in the way that we don't like to see him. We saw Pedro basically being completely invisible. We saw Noslin's inability to finish chances when he had them. You see what I mean? It was like we needed some part of this team to step up to the occasion, but it felt like obviously every team, there are elements of weakness around your squad, but it felt like Inter were just able to find the weakness of almost every player on this pitch and expose it. And especially in that second half, that's what went wrong. I mean, Marusic isn't a centre-back, so I don't know how much we can blame him for playing badly as a centre-back. But, you're asking, did the game change after Gila went off? Well, clearly, because it was 0-0 when he went off and we were playing well. And Gigot comes on and has a bit of a mare, to be honest, in the 10 minutes he was on the pitch. And then I think once you've got a back four of Lazzari and Tavares, who we know are not great defensively, with Patrick and Marusic. And yeah, Patrick, talking about him getting exposed, we know that he's a fighter, he's good on the ball as a defender, but he's not a physical guy. And that cross for DiMarco's goal, it's just, he looked like a child, it kind of sails over his head and he's jumping to get it, but he's just not big enough to even make the header, and then struggles physically against Thuram as well, like you said. And so, yeah, it was difficult to watch, to be honest.
So we have to mention something, because Baroni had issue. I mean, Castellano was out. He couldn't play. He got the yellow card in the last game, so he was suspended. Dia, Baroni told us after the game that he wasn't fit. He had a little ankle injury, so he preferred not to risk him. We lost Romagnoli and Vecino were out of the squad. We lost Gila, we lost Gigot. So we didn't have that many options, which is something that people forget. I mean, Inter had Zelinski. Let's not forget, Zelinski won the Serie A title 2 years ago with Napoli, and he was a starter. Frattesi, he is starting for the national team, and he hardly plays in Inter. I mean, Frattesi would be a starter for us, easy peasy, right? Every single game. So that's one thing we have to mention. The other thing, Alasdair, probably we weren't very lucky, because you mentioned Patrick. I thought one of the things we have to talk about is the physique of Inter player was a game changer, right? Nosli in that type of game struggled. He was marked by Bastoni, De Vrij, all big guys, and he couldn't do pretty much nothing. Patrick struggled against Thuram, physical guy. The only physical guy we had was marked by Dumfries, who is another big guy, big body, right? Probably with Castellanos, the game could have been different, right? Maybe he could have fought a little bit better than Nosli. And same thing about Dia instead of Pedro, right? Pedro is a talented player, but you don't talk about him like a big body, right? So That had an impact, I think, in the game, especially going forward. Not at the beginning where we were running a lot, but when a little bit of time come up, you could see the difference, right?
Yeah, but I think they kind of allowed Inter to make it that kind of game. It was like that first third of the match. It was played on Lazio's terms, and we were able to see Lazio's quality because they had a lot of the ball. They were able to attack down the wings quite a lot, creating a few chances, nothing amazing, but a few decent openings. Getting the ball to the wingers, so it shows you that there was a kind of game to play there. That means that that's not a given that Inter are going to dominate physically. But once Inter started, those big switches of play, getting the balls into the box from deep, playing direct, that classic Inzaghi stuff that we know very well. Once they got that going, the disappointment was that Lazio didn't seem to have any response to it. And in the way that in that first 35 minutes or so, we would see Rovella making good tackles or Guendouzi making interceptions and that kind of stuff. Suddenly, I don't know, I didn't see them anywhere. There was just kind of open space in midfield too, and it took Baroni a little while to bring on Deli Bashiru and try to adjust the midfield to stop that flow of bodies coming through. And I don't know, I mean, Baroni, I thought he spoke about the defeat really well after, in terms of identifying what went wrong and this complete disconnection that the team had after the first goals went in. But in terms of him taking the blame entirely on himself, I'm not sure he should. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think he's a player manager, so he defended his players. I hope that today, and for Melo, he's shouting and asking for answers, because the manager can take the blame if he picks the wrong starting 11, or if he's tactically dominated by the other manager, but not because the team mentally collapse. I think you cannot do, as a manager, what can you do? You can get in the pitch and play instead of the players. That's not possible. So I understand why he did it, but obviously he wasn't Baroni's blame. I mean, he did everything, I think, to win, considering the option he had, right? But again, you were mentioning Rovella and Guendouzi. You didn't have any option yesterday. I mean, probably that was the game where you should sub both of them. But who do you bring in? Castrovilli? I mean, I was at the stadium and asked, we are 4-0 down and Castrovilli still doesn't get a chance to play. He played, what was it, the last 10, 15 minutes? Which tells you a lot, right? And he played left wing, which is obviously not his position. It's just like, hey, I don't have a Primavera here, so let's play someone who doesn't play a lot. So Castrovilli, play a little bit of football finally. That's, for me, a terrible sign, right? It's like, I could play Furlanetto left back if he wanted to.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of embarrassing that the game's so far gone that usually you do those kind of changes when you're winning a game 5-0, not when you're losing one. But they completely lost hope. To the extent that they're just making changes to give players game time, to give players minutes. How much do we take from a result like this overall is an interesting question, I think, because I think you can almost leave this game in isolation. The two games against Napoli and then the Ajax win is such an encouraging start that if you want to try and find some sort of silver lining here, it's a big reminder, bigger than we would like, that there is still such a big gap between this Lazio team and a proper championship winning team like Inter. Regardless of what the league table is saying, there is a gap there, and things have been going fantastically well, but it is worth keeping everything in perspective. And I think that the reaction of the fans afterwards was amazing and really shows that people do have that perspective, which I was really relieved by, if anything.
Yeah, we have to say something that we had a huge opportunity yesterday, right? Because Fiorentina lost, Juventus draw, Milan draw, and so if you won against Inter, you were third alone, gaining points over all your opponents. So table wise, it would have been terrific to win that game. But I think this brings a little bit people in perspective, right? People thinking Lazio will finish in the Champions League because we're winning every single games. I'm not sure about that. And yesterday's game proved that, right? We beat Napoli, we deserve to win, but Inter is another level. So far, we lost against Juventus. We can talk about the defeat against Juventus, unfair, etc., but we lost. We drew against Milan. That is, we are seeing Milan is embarrassing, and we were able to not win at home against this team. We lost against Fiorentina. Again, we can talk about the referee, etc., but in the second half, Lazio didn't play that well. So, when I hear people, some people were talking about the Scudetto, others were talking about the Champions League. I think this team has to grow before we can talk about this. So maybe losing yesterday is going to be positive on that side. But, I think to understand, we have to see how Lazio plays against Lecce, because did the team forget about this terrible game? Well, we're not going to know it today. We're going to see it on Saturday against Lecce, right? And if Lazio perform badly, then that raises eyebrow, right? Because you can lose against Inter, but if that affects the rest of the season, then that's going to be an issue.
Yeah. The Atalanta game for me is the big test of what they've learned from this, because Atalanta are the closest thing to Inter this season in terms of quality, in terms of form, depth, where they are in the table. So that as a challenge is not far off, to be honest. But they can't allow themselves to be exposed in the same way. I think the fans have forgiven and clearly will forgive one big mistake, one big mess up like this, on the basis that it's a blip. This doesn't represent what has overall been a very positive season. But Atalanta is different. I don't think that would be accepted in the same way, to lose heavily to a team who we do see usually as a Champions League qualification rival, rather than a team that's ahead of us fighting for a Scudetto or anything, even if people are talking about that this year more. So what's worrying me there is that Nicolo Zaniolo started scoring goals, and I just feel like that's inevitable. But let's avoid talking about that for now. But yeah, so I think we saw some positives in terms of these big game performances when you list them off like you just did in Serie A. It's not been great, but then this run was always going to be really hard in December, and to have already got those 2 Napoli wins and the Ajax win under the belt is really good, regardless of this. But they do need to follow that up against Atalanta, I think.
Alasdair, can I ask you a question? Because even against Ajax, they found they scored at the beginning of the second half, and that could be a game changer, right? Ajax was pushing, they score immediately beginning of the second half. Lazio could have collapsed. Instead, in Amsterdam, we played much better after their goal. We dominated the game and we won. Why do you think this time the team didn't react like we did in Amsterdam? Something different?
I don't know. It was strange to me, we used to talk about blackouts a lot. I don't think you can even use that expression here, because it lasted about 55 minutes.
So, for a blackout.
Yeah. But it felt to me like the team kind of collectively had a bit of a mental collapse. They kind of lost their heads, and they didn't know how to regroup. They didn't find that leadership anywhere, whether it was from Baroni on the bench or from anyone on the pitch. There was nobody there who seemed to be able to pull that team back together and just get them to settle a bit. We need to regroup here. Let's just dig in for a while. Let's work hard for each other. Back to basics a little bit. I felt like Lazio's response to being up against it was to try and be a bit more aggressive and a bit too over the top. Just before those third and fourth goals, there was just some absolutely mad pressing going on where I think it was Zaccagni and then Pedro. They're just like completely sprinting up the pitch to put pressure on Jan Sommer, but there's no one going with them. And it ended up just kind of like dragging all these players kind of up the pitch, but in different positions. And it wasn't really like a proper press. And there's all this space, and all of a sudden the ball's up the other end and into score. So it's stuff like that. It was kind of like they wanted their response to be, let's be aggressive, let's play our game, this kind of thing, but they went about it in the wrong way. So I think they just got a bit confused. The way it looked to me anyway was that they got a bit confused about what was the best way to respond to a team like Inter. Like, do you show them respect or do you go at them? And yeah, they clearly got it badly wrong.
Yeah, it's strange because, again, this team, this season at least, was able to regroup immediately, to not give up after conceding a goal, which last year happened a lot. So it was a little bit surprising because, again, the thing I don't understand is before the penalty, we were dominating. Then something changed completely. This team maybe black out for 5 minutes, the penalty and the Di Marco goal, but then didn't show any. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't create a single chance in the second half. That's the thing that concerned me.
Exactly.
I mean, usually it happens that when you lose so badly, it's because you are creating chances and you're off balance. The counter-attack and scores you. We didn't create nothing. I thought Nosley was invisible. I thought Isaacsen was bad. But the thing is, Isaacsen come off. Chauna comes in, and immediately he lose the ball, and Inter scored the fifth goal. So every substitution Baroni was making was terrible. I mean, it was even worse than the player starting, right?
Yeah. I think that, like I said at the start, it was a night where a lot of weaknesses were exposed, both in the individuals, but also in the squad as a whole. Because you can't rely on Adam Maricic clearly to be playing as your fifth choice centre back. Okay, you won't have much harder introductions to that than marking Lautaro Martinez and Marcus Thuram, but at the same time, I don't think it's a viable option. I think they do need a fifth centre back in the squad. And we know that in midfield, we've been saying all season, these two parts of the squad are too thin. They just are. And that's the risk. Obviously it's unlucky for that to be exposed on a night like this, where Vecino's not available to help out the midfield, and Romagnoli and Gila and Gigot are all unavailable to help out the defense. But that problem exists anyway, And I think January around the corner, it's not something they can really ignore if they want to be serious about competing in the Europa League, which they look pretty serious about. And making a run for Champions League qualification next year. I think to achieve both of those things, you do need to be realistic about this squad, which for me has been started brilliantly, but is still overperforming really compared to expectations, and does still have some problems, some problem areas.
And let's not forget that the only defender who finished the game was Patrick, who is injury prone, right? This season he didn't play a lot, so you cannot expect Patrick to play every single game going forward.
Well, they all are, though, aren't they? I mean, Romagnoli's had tons of injuries. Gila's had injuries,
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Romagnoli should have recovered against Ajax. Do you remember? And then they said no. we're giving extra time to be sure he recovers for Inter, which he didn't. Same thing about Vecino. Someone said Vecino was ready for Napoli. Then he missed Ajax, etc. Hila, how many games did he miss? I mean, we started Casale at the beginning of the season. Let's not forget, the first 2 games Casale had to play, not because he was the best defender, because he showed he wasn't the best, but we didn't have any option. Hila was injured, Patrick was injured, we only have Casale. So this tells you a lot about the situation. I think this summer we must sign 2 central defender. And I don't want to be too harsh, but I don't think Gigot is the answer, right? He's very dangerous as a central defender. He showed it yesterday with a penalty, but I think he played 3 games in Europe League and got 1 yellow card in every single game. He's going to be suspended the next game. And, in 3 games, it's not easy to be suspended, right? So this is another problem. Yellow card is going to pick up. And, with Romagnoli, who you never know when he's going to be back. Hila, who has issue, etc. It's going to be an issue. Even because you're not going to play Nuno Tavares, central defender. Are you going to play Dele Bashiru, central defender? I mean, Marus is the only option available. Lazzari cannot play in that position. So,
also, Marasic is the only one who's reliable physically. Yeah. Because even Lazzari, and this is the other problem, Lazzari isn't reliable physically.
Same thing with Tavares.
Yeah, but what I mean is, we're relying on Marasic to be covering right back too. So if there's a problem for Lazzari on top of a problem for the rest of the centre backs, it's a real problem. I mean, maybe El Husai just needs to be brought back into the fold after his performance against Napoli, because he offers something different to the other full backs. He can play on either side comfortably. Okay, he's more defensive, a lot more defensive than the likes of Tavares and Lazzari, but that's not necessarily a bad thing to give you another option. And he's got tons of experience. And from his performance against Napoli, is clearly someone who still cares enough to fight and have real pride in his performance and be part of the team and so on.
Yeah,
I
think
if that option is just sitting in the squad, it seems like a waste to not use it.
Can I ask you something? Because there are rumors that Lazio is thinking about cutting Castrovilli in January. Would you do it? And would you rather bring back Inzaghi or try to sign Rumosa, Casadei or a central midfielder rather than bringing back Inzaghi?
Well, it's tricky, this kind of like acrobatics of trying to work out a squad, because I would like to bring back Husai on the basis of the defensive issues we're talking about. But would I give up a central midfielder for him? No, because we really need central midfielders. So if there is an idea to give up on Castrovilli, I think it has to be in order to bring in someone else who's more reliable in midfield, because they're desperately short on options there.
But would you cut Castrovilli in January or give him more chances?
I'd like him to see out the season, to be honest. We knew when we signed him that there were physical problems, that it was a gamble. So it would seem a bit stupid to me to give up after 6 months, because what did you really expect within 6 months anyway?
To
play. Yeah, but it's disappointing. But I feel like a full year at least gives you a better idea of what you're really dealing with.
Don't you think
it feels really harsh to me to cut it after 6 months?
I can understand, but don't you feel that the message yesterday Baroni sent was pretty clear? I mean, we are down 4-0. Rovella and Guendouzi are out of the game. They are struggling. You need to take them out and bring someone in. So Castrovilli was was the only solution he had. Instead, you kept them both, and you take off Zaccagni 10 minutes before the end of the game and put Castrovilli completely out of position. It's really like the sign that, hey, you're useless for me, but the game is over. Let's give you some playtime, so at least you play a couple of minutes. He didn't come in against Napoli. Both games, He pretty
The
much.
thing, the thing I don't really get is that at the start of the season, we talked about the fact that he didn't really have an obvious position in this team, and I still think being one of a mediano like Guendouzi or Ravella, that isn't his position in this team. But what I don't really understand is why, when Baroni has used the 4-3-3, but with one more advanced, why Castrovilli is not being used more as a kind of 10 or a more attack-minded central midfielder who's less attacking, I guess, than using a Dia or a Pedro, but more than when he's used Vecino there, for example. Because that
Because I
seems
think
like a more obvious fit for Castrovilli, but I can't remember him ever really getting much of a chance there.
because he's not fit. He Baroni knows that he cannot do that much, and so he plays him only when the game is over. I mean, how do they call it in NBA? Junk time, something like that. It's garbage time. Sorry, he's playing garbage time. The game was over. Castrovilli. If we had a Primavera guy on the bench, probably he would have come in. Castrovilli.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be fair even for him, right? If I don't know, Lecce say, hey, if you come here, you're gonna play, then maybe it's a best opportunity for him because he's not gonna play here. It's quite obvious, right? I mean, Saturday we're playing against Lecce. Now I don't know our injury situation, but that's another opportunity. I don't think he's gonna play against Atalanta. That would be a huge mistake. So, or he's playing against Lecce. Oh, he's done for me. I mean, that's a clear signal, right? Dele Bashiro is improving. Rovella and Guendouzi are starters. Vecino is going to be back sooner or later. So this is his last opportunity, I think.
Yeah, and that is worth picking up on, actually. Dele Bashiru has been good in that position in the last couple of games before this, obviously. So that is a positive. Trying to sound quite upbeat. And overall, look, I mean, yeah, if people didn't see this, at the end of the game, when the full-time whistle went, first of all, there were no boos, which, if you've lost 6-0 at home, is kind of amazing. Even, if Empoli lost 6-0 at home, you would imagine they would get booed off. And then secondly, the team went under the curva after the game, had a little chat by the looks of things, and then were kind of roared off in encouragement and cheered off the pitch. I don't know, were you still in the stadium at that point, Vittorio? Because it was kind of amazing to see, to be honest, that this team has just been absolutely humiliated and they're being kind of cheered down the tunnel by the fans.
And I don't know if you saw it because I saw it on TV. Thuram was interviewed after the game, and before he got the question from Vieri, he said, the Lazio fans are unbelievable. They lost 6-0 and they're still chanting. They're still up there. So this tells you a lot about the fans. To be honest, I was surprised because I was there and a lot of people left after the 4-0 goal. So, but we stayed. Obviously, I always stay till the end of the match. So a lot of goals Lazio in extra time, so in injury time, etc. But you always stay. And I was surprised to see fans not booing the team, but supporting, chanting, etc. They finished chanting, "We'll always be with you." So that's a clear message from fans. And we said it before, right? Nobody expected the team to perform so well this season. We didn't talk about the Ajax game. Lazio is still top of the table in the Europa League. I mean, this never happened. This never happened in the past. So this team we beat Napoli not one, twice. So we are overperforming. And the fans showed respect, and that's very good. The only boos I heard yesterday was for De Vrij, which I totally agree and understand. And it was funny because the first goal De Vrij scored, he didn't celebrate, but I thought, he could even celebrate. They're gonna boo him anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to avoid those boos. They were crazy. The Europa League 15, 16, 17, 18, right. So I was going to say it's annoying at the moment that we're absolutely flying in the Europa League, but because some big teams are doing crap, we still actually have a chance of playing some really big teams in the last 16. So I had a look at it, and so we could end up with Porto,
Yeah,
in the last 16 as things stand, or Olympiacos, who won the Conference League last year. So yeah, we could do with a few those bigger teams moving up the table a little bit.
I think it's going to happen in the last games or so.
Yeah, although obviously a couple of games still to go. What have we got? Sociedad and Braga. And oh my God, I was covering Roma Braga for work, and they made Roma look like Real Madrid. I mean, they were so bad. I mean, Roma played well, but wow. So I feel confident about that one.
Okay. You know that Braga against us is going to play like Real Madrid, right?
Vittorio, I know we're running a bit longer today, but I think to finish on a positive note, which would be a nice thing to do on a day like today, we should probably mention the Stadio Flaminio latest.
Yeah. Do you want to go, or I'll start?
Well, yeah. We were asked about this last week. Was it last week? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And gave a little update, but now it's happened. Claudio Lotito has been to the Campidoglio. He's met the mayor of Rome and the guy in charge of I'm not sure what the assessor of sport. I mean, I'm not sure what that is in English, if there is actually a term. But
well, he's in charge about all the sport activities in Rome. So he helped organize the tennis tournament, all the other sport activity and music activity. So basically, on Friday morning at 10 o'clock, they had this meeting and they presented this project. Now, obviously, the first part was presenting the project to the mayor and hear if the mayor was happy or not. Now the project has been officially presented. Now there's going to be a committee of engineers, I think, architects, that is going to see if it's doable. Because obviously, you can do a cathedral and they will say, hey, no, it's not possible. So now the next step is going to see if this project is possible. Then they're going to have another committee that's going to say, okay, let's see how this impact and what's going to happen. Is there someone who's against us or approve this? Then there's going to be the final decision. And then someone is going to take charge of building this stadium. One thing very important that we didn't know is that Lazio presented a project not only for the stadium, but for the full area of the Flaminio, which is important because obviously, one of the biggest issue of going to the stadium is one chance of meeting Alasdair McKenzie. But the second one is reaching the stadium, which is quite complicated, right? No parking, traffic jams, not a lot of bus going there, etc. So Lotito presented a project to improve parking in the area, improve bus stops there. There's even a project of building a bridge to help this. There was a bridge that was planned in the 60s, if I'm not wrong, that never was realized. And now in this Lazio full project, even that is considered to improve the traffic for the Stadio Flaminio. So it's a very huge project, very complicated, but very interesting. One thing we have to mention is that part of this team that Lotito built, there's even the nephew, I think, of Nervi, that is the architecture that built the stadium. Because if you remember, a couple of years ago, the daughter said, no, we're never going to allow Lazio to build a stadium, to get this stadium, etc. Instead, the nephew was there. And he said, yeah, I'm part of the project. What Lotito did is very interesting, etc., etc. They're going to, I don't know, we never saw the project, but he said that the structure is going to be in place and still be visible. They're going to build something extra above it. So I'm curious, but it looks like it's going forward. Then, it's Rome. It could take ages, but at least the first official step have been done. And so we are going to have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, and the reason that this is really significant, above all, is that it's the first time that something concrete has actually happened. Because up until now, when we've been doing our podcasts at the Flaminio talking about this, it's all been about what everyone is saying rather than anything actually really happening. And it's all been about ideas and concepts rather than reality. And I guess when this deadline was looming about when Lazio had to present this project by, there was probably a concern in the back of some people's minds like, Are they going to manage to do this in time? Do they actually have the project? Is it going to be good enough? So not only have they actually got the project and it's officially been, approved and so on, but it seems to have really impressed the people who've seen it, which is good. I mean, like you say, this is very much step one, and these things are very convoluted and they're completely covered in red tape. And Roma have, for example, had a lot of issues beyond this point in the past with stadium projects. You would hope that this one, because it's the Flaminio, because they've addressed the whole area, they've tried to get ahead of a few of those issues. I think that's pretty smart that they could do it. I mean, I think when Lotito was talking about having this done in 3 years, I think he's outrageously ambitious.
We have to mention another thing, because Lazio wasn't the only team presenting a project for the Stadio Flaminio. Even Roma Nuoto presented a project, and they presented it earlier than Lazio, but it got refused. So this is a huge boost for Lazio, because if you don't have competitors, well, the mayor hasn't got many options, right? It's all Lazio, we keep it like this. And the stadium is collapsing. So I think it makes a lot of sense to give it to Lazio. So, yeah, we're going to see, obviously, how things go. Anything can happen in Italy when politics get involved. But I hope this project goes on.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. And it's so good that the club's committed to this course as well, because for a while, obviously, what we were discussing was whether the Stadio Flaminio project was one idea among a few different ideas, including building a whole new stadium and all this stuff. So I think all of us were hoping this would be the route forward, and it would be absolutely amazing if it happens. So I think that is a nice, if we're going to find a positive thing on the morning after a 6-0 defeat, then it's probably this.
Yeah, definitely. Alex, I think we're going to wrap it up here, right? Thanks everybody for listening. Yeah, it's been tough. It's been a tough Monday, but we are still there. We are 5th in the table. We have plenty of games to play to recover. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Alasdair, for joining me. Please, if you like this podcast, support us at patreon.com/Lazio Lounge, and we'll be back as soon as possible. Take care, guys.
Cheers.